For Mir, the year 1997 started with the launch of Atlantis for STS-81 in January.
T-minus 10, 9, 8. We have a go for main engine start. We have main engines up and running. 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Atlantis on a 10-day mission to dock with Russia's orbiting outpost.
Houston now controlling the flight of Atlantis.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Atlantis into the roll to place the shuttle in a heads-down, wings-level position for the 8.5-minute ride to orbit.
On board was astronaut Jerry Leninger, who was to replace John Blaha, who stayed on Mir for 118 days. During this fifth shuttle docking, the crew of Atlantis moved supplies to the station and returned to Earth to first plants to complete a life cycle in space, a crop of wheat planted by Shannon Lucid. During 5 days of mated operation, the crew transferred nearly 6,000 pounds of logistics to Mir and transferred 24,000 pounds of materials back to Atlantis, the most materials transferred between the two spacecraft to that date. The STS-81 crew also tested the shuttle treadmill vibration isolation and stabilization system, designed for use on the Zvezda module of the International Space Station. While docked, the shuttle fired its small Vernier jet thrusters to gather engineering data for reboosting the ISS. After undocking, Atlantis performed a fly-around of Mir, leaving Leninger aboard the station. On February 10, 1997, the Mir-23 mission began when cosmonauts Vasily Siblyev and Alexander Lazutkin and German research cosmonaut Reinhold Ewald were launched on Soyuz TM-25. The crew docked with Mir 2 days later. Within meters of the automatic approach to the station, a slight misalignment was noted, and the commander of the module had to take over and manually dock to the station. After they docked to the aft port, Leninger became the first American to conduct a spacewalk from a foreign space station, and the first to test a Russian-built Orlan M spacesuit alongside Russian cosmonaut Siblyev. All 3 crew members of the expedition EO-23 performed a fly-around in the Soyuz spacecraft, first undocking from one docking port of the station, then manually flying over and redocking at the other one. This made Leninger the first American to undock from a space station aboard 2 different spacecraft, the Space Shuttle and Soyuz. Reinhold Ewald amused himself while on board the Mir station. He used Kristall as his private domain. His American colleague, Jerry Leninger, had his private quarter in Spectre. Leninger slept there, had room for his personal belongings, and he found a free surface on the wall to fasten some photographs. Reinhold Ewald successfully executed the program he was assigned, but something went wrong. In the framework of a medical experiment, he had to drink 200 milliliters tomato juice with salt, but bad quality of juice made this impossible. Other experiments, for instance, the Titus oven, the French Alice II installation, which studied the characteristics of liquids, and the MedX medical experiments, were more successful. Mir crew members typically obtained oxygen on Mir through solar-powered electrolysis of water, along with oxygen stored in pressurized oxygen storage tanks. However, whenever the space station became home to more than 3 crew members, additional oxygen supply became necessary. With 6 crew members on board, the astronauts used chemical oxygen canisters to increase the supply. In February of 1997, After replacing a canister, an unknown event occurred during the replacement process, causing one of the canisters to ignite shortly after replacement. The flames had sufficient oxygen supply due to a chemical reaction going on within the canister, leading to a blade of flame that threatened the lives of the crew and singed the interior of one of Mir's capsules. The crew responded quickly, grabbing fire extinguishers, and one astronaut needed to hold the other so that they didn't move backwards in the absence of gravity.
I did not expect smoke to spread so quickly. It was magnitude, I don't know, maybe 10 times faster than I would expect a fire to spread on a space station.
Newly arrived U.S. astronaut and physician Dr. Jerry Leninger stated the fire lasted a painful 14 minutes, though early NASA and Russian Federal Space Agency reports claimed it lasted just 90 seconds. It's currently believed that a small piece of glove became lodged in the replacement container. A series of experiments conducted in the years following the Mir fire determined that if a piece of latex glove becomes stuck in a chemical oxygen generator, it can initiate a fire similar to the one observed in the 1997 aboard Mir. This discovery led to an alteration of protocol when changing out the generators, with latex gloves used in the process aboard stations now collected and examined for defects after installation. In April, the famous Progress M34 launched to Mir and docked 2 days later. Several missions to Mir occurred after the fire. In May of 1997, Atlantis delivered crew and cargo, and U.S. astronaut C. Mike Foale exchanged places with Jerry Leninger. The research program conducted by Foale featured 35 investigations total, 33 on Mir, 2 on STS-84, and another pre-flight and post-flight. Covering 6 disciplines: advanced technology, Earth observations and remote sensing, fundamental biology, human life sciences, space station risk mitigation, and microgravity sciences. 28 of these were conducted during the previous missions and were to be continued, repeated, or completed during Foale's stay. Seven new experiments were planned in biological and crystal growth studies and materials processing.
Jerry, it's great to see you, and we're looking forward to having you back at Ellington.
After 5 days docked, Atlantis undocked and returned to Earth.
Atlantis now on the glide slope and on center line, setting up for the final approach and landing to runway 33. The landing gear is now down and locked. Main gear touchdown.
Foale's increment proceeded fairly normally until June 25, 1997. Progress M34 undocked from the station and moved away as all Progress craft had. However, to test a manual docking of a Progress, Sibliev had to virtually fly the Progress from onboard Mir while he watched a video screen that showed an image from the camera on board the craft. Progress left its parking orbit and began moving rapidly towards Mir. But on the video screen, it was difficult to make out the station, Sibliev said. The Mir complex, quote, looked very similar to the clouds below it. Sibliev's deficient perception had a further limitation. According to Mike Foale, what Vasily was seeing on his screen was an image that didn't change in size very fast. That's the nature of using a TV screen to judge your speed and distance. You can't determine accurately from an image that the speed was too high. By the time Sibliev could judge the speed, the Progress was already traveling too fast. He fired the braking rockets, but it was too late. Alexander Lazutkin finally saw the Progress, and he realized the danger. He told everyone to get into the escape ship, and he later described the onrushing Progress as looking full of menace, like a shark. He said he watched the black body covered in spots sliding past and below me. He looked closer, and at that point there was a great thump, and the whole station shook. The Progress had collided with the solar array on the Spectre module. Then the spacecraft hit Spectre itself, punched a hole in the solar panel, buckled a radiator, and breached the integrity of Spectre's hull. The crew quickly cut cables leading to the module and closed Spectre's hatch in order to prevent the need to abandon the station in their Soyuz lifeboat. Their efforts stabilized the station's air pressure, while pressure in the Spectre, containing many of Foal's experiments and personal effects, dropped to a vacuum. Fortunately, food, water, and other vital supplies were stored in other modules, and salvage and replanning effort by Foal and the science community minimized the loss of research data and the capability of the station. The collision had also knocked Mir into a spin, and the power outage had shut down the gyrodynes so that the spin now went uncontrolled. To stop the spin and face the arrays towards the sun, the crew needed to know the spin rate of Mir. However, the computer and other instruments were out of operation, so in the dark and in silence, Foal went to the windows in the airlock and held his thumb up to the field of stars. Combining a sailor's technique with a scientist's knowledge of physics, Foal estimated the spin rate of the station. Then he and Lazutkin radioed the estimates down to the Moscow Control Center, and ground controllers fired Mir's engines and stopped the spin. Certainly not perfectly, and in no way permanently, but it showed that it could be done.
We thought there was a collision imminent. The thought in our minds was we are going to have to bail out. And I was the first one to go per the procedures to the Soyuz, and there I waited. Then, as it became apparent that it wasn't a devastating puncture of the hull of Spectre module, and that we had time to work and try and isolate it, then I came out of the Soyuz, understood implicitly that we were not going to be abandoning quite yet. And we then proceeded to work together. I was Sasha Lazutkin to clear cables and hold a hatch in place over that module's entranceway. We had about 24 minutes of what we call reserve time before we had to be in the Soyuz if we hadn't isolated the leak. And so once we determined that time, and Vasily, the commander, had done that, we knew that we had some time to think carefully, clearly, what we were doing and work through the problems of sealing off the leak in the hatch.
A few months later, on August 7, 1997, Soyuz TM-26 docked with Mir by manual control. The crew repaired the power cable and harness connectors in the severely damaged Spectre module and restored much of the lost power. They also repaired and replaced the oxygen generators in Mir. Following their arrival at the station, Commander Anatoly Solyov and Flight Engineer Pavel Vinogradov conducted an internal spacewalk inside the depressurized Spectre module on August 22nd. They reconnected 11 power cables from the Spectre solar arrays to a new custom-made hatch for Spectre. During the spacewalk, Foal remained inside the Soyuz capsule attached to Mir, in constant communications with the cosmonauts, as well as ground controllers. The modifications that they made during the internal spacewalk allowed power generation to return to approximately 70% of the pre-collision generation capability. However, Spectre was left depressurized and isolated for the remainder of Mir. In September, Foal and Solovyov conducted a 6-hour external extravehicular activity to survey the damage outside of Spectre and try to pinpoint where the breach of the module's hull had occurred. 2 undamaged arrays were manually repositioned to better gather solar energy, and a radiation device left previously by Jerry Leninger was retrieved. After these incidences, the U.S. Congress and NASA considered whether to abandon the program out of concerns for astronaut safety. But NASA Administrator Daniel Golden decided to continue the program. So to the next flight of Mir, STS-86, brought increment astronaut David Wolf to the station.
10, 9, 8, 7. We have a go for main engine. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Atlantis, extending America's presence in space while opening new chapters in exploration.
Houston now controlling. Houston now controlling. Roll program initiated to place Atlantis on its heads down track over the Atlantic.
The 7th Mir docking mission continued the presence of U.S. astronauts on the Russian space station, with the transfer of physician David Wolf to Mir in September 1997. Highlights of the 10-day mission include 5 days docked to the station and exchanges of crew. Atlantis loaded the Space Hab double module to support the transfer of logistics and supplies for Mir, and the return of experiment hardware and specimens to Earth. The first joint U.S.-Russian extravehicular activity during a shuttle mission, which was also the 39th in the Space Shuttle program, was conducted by Vladimir Titov and Scott Prerazinski, who arrived on Atlantis. During the 5-hour spacewalk on October 1st, the pair affixed a 121-pound solar array cap to the docking module for future use by Mir crew members to seal off the suspected leak in Spectre's hull. During the 6 days of docked operation, the joint Mir-24 and STS-86 crews transferred more than 4 tons of material from the Space Hab double module to Mir, including approximately 771 kilograms of water, experiment hardware for International Space Station risk mitigation experiments to monitor the Mir crew for health and safety, a gyrodyne, batteries, 3 air pressurization units, an attitude control computer, and many other logistical items. The crew also moved experiment samples and hardware and an old electron oxygen generator to Atlantis for a return to Earth. After undocking, Atlantis performed a 46-minute fly-around visual inspection of Mir. During this maneuver, Solovyov and Vinogradov opened a pressure regulation valve to allow air into the Spectre module to see if STS-89 crew members could detect seepage or debris particles that could indicate the location of the breach in the damaged module's hull. They didn't see anything. 1998 started with STS-89, the 8th of 9 planned missions to Mir, and the 5th involving an exchange of U.S. astronauts, but the first using Shuttle Endeavour.
Ignition and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Endeavour, continuing the union of U.S. and Russian space endeavors.
Astronaut David Wolf, who had been on Mir since late September 1997, was replaced by astronaut Andrew Thomas. Thomas spent approximately 4 months on the orbiting Russian facility before returning to Earth with Discovery docked to Mir in late May during STS-91. During the mission, more than 7,000 pounds of experiments, supplies, and hardware were transferred between the 2 spacecraft. It stayed 5 days at Mir and returned to Earth without incident.
Landing gear coming down. Landing gear down and locked. Main gear touchdown. Drag chute now being deployed. Nose wheel touchdown. Endeavour now rolling out on runway 15 at Kennedy Space Center at the end of a 9-day, 3.6 million mile journey, bringing home astronaut Dave Wolf from his 4-month stay in space.
The same day Atlantis undocked from Mir, January 29, 1998, the 33rd expedition to Mir launched from Baikonur, with crew members Talgat Musabayev, Nikolai Budarin, and Leopold Ihart from France. The main mission was to exchange one crew member and for Ihart to spend 3 weeks assisting the Pegasus mission. He performed various French experiments in the area of medical research, neuroscience, biology, fluid physics, and technology. And during his space mission, he logged 20 days, 18 hours, and 20 minutes in space. The rest of the crew attempted to repair Spectre's solar panel and installed the new VDU station orientation system.
10, 9,
The last shuttle mission to Mir was STS-91 in June of 1998.
4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have booster ignition and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery as NASA embarks on the final mission to dock with Russia's space station Mir.
Here's the Discovery roll program.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
Docking occurred on June 4, 1998. Hatches opened at 2:34 p.m. the same day, and Andrew Thomas officially became a member of Discovery's crew, completing 130 days of living and working on Mir. The transfer wrapped up a total of 907 days spent by 7 U.S. astronauts aboard the Russian space station as long-duration crew members. During the next 4 days, the Mir 25 and STS-91 crews transferred more than 1,000 pounds of water and almost 4,700 pounds of cargo experiments and supplies. During this time, long-term U.S. experiments aboard Mir were moved into Discovery's mid-deck locker area and into the SpaceHab single module in the orbiter's payload bay, including the Space Acceleration Measurement System and the Tissue Engineering Co-Culture investigations, as well as 2 crystal growth experiments. The crew also conducted risk mitigation experiments and human life sciences investigations. Data originally planned to be sent to ground station through Discovery's Ku-band communication systems was recorded on board because of a problem with the Ku-band system that prevented it from sending high-rate communications, including television signals to the ground. The system was able to receive uplink transmissions, but not downlink. Data that could not be recorded by ground stations was recorded on board and returned later. When the hatches closed for undocking on June 8th, the spacecraft separated and the final Shuttle-Mir docking mission was concluded, as was Phase 1 of the International Space Station program. As Shuttle-Mir turned to Phase 2, Proton and Shuttle missions began servicing the ISS rather than Mir. Work began on the new station with the first module, Zarya, which was launched on November 20th, 1998, on a Proton rocket.
Liftoff of the Proton rocket and the Zarya control module. The International Space Station is underway. The Proton building up thrust, good roll and pitch program according to flight controllers. The first component of the International Space Station heading toward orbit.
Zarya is very much a continuation of the Salyut-Mir TKS station design, and serves as the base unit of the space station even today. Mir was no longer growing, but like an elder began to shrink, and it was nearing the end.